Okay, I would suggest we start. Naren, thank you for being here today at HBI. You just said to me that you're more of a background person, a closer person, so we're really happy that you're here and you're willing to be recorded and talk to our students. I think they're very happy you are here too. I've learned that your company is only 5 years old, 4.5 only. Even more impressive is that you already have 20 million people on your platform every month. You also have 300 employees. And GoEuro is rated one of the most valuable startups in Berlin with 150 million venture capital involved. Your investors are Goldman Sachs, Klein & Perkins, and also Platinum Ventures. So this is interesting, but also your personal story is quite interesting because you were born in Bangalore, studied at Harvard, but you decided to come here to Berlin and start a company here. So what is interesting to me is, why did you start your company here in Berlin? Maybe you would like to talk about this later on. So we're happy to have you here. I already said you're always on the lookout for IT talents. Coincidentally, we have the
40 to 50 open positions.
Yeah, so get connected. Maybe you want to join us at our HBI Startup Connect Fair in November. We would be happy to have you again. So thank you for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is only my third talk in front of students, so if I mess up, correct me. I'm getting used to this as well, let's say. Just by a show of hands, everyone here's a current student in computer science? Everyone? Anyone not? Yeah? Just background, what do you guys study so I can...
I'm here at the School of Entrepreneurship.
Oh, very cool.
With my PhD in entrepreneurship.
Very cool. And the others?
I study German history.
German history, very cool. I love history, so... I do. So I have a travel company. Whenever we travel, I spend most of my time learning history when I'm traveling. So it kind of comes well together. So you guys?
We're at D School.
D School.
Learning design thinking.
Design thinking. Wow, very cool. Well, thank you. So I'm very happy to chat. I've made a few slides on just building products that solve consumer problems. I'm going to touch on very briefly some consumer problems that consumers don't even know exist. So I'm going to touch on some of that. I'm going to talk about the evolution of product, because no product at the beginning is perfect to solve a specific problem. And also touch on very briefly at the beginning how I came about the problem and where we are. And then I'll go into how we scale, how to build an organization, how to build a product that scales, and then what's next. Does that sound good? It's a very informal talk, so feel free to jump in anytime you want, and we'll go from there. So how did I start? So very briefly about myself. You already mentioned I was born in Bangalore. I studied in the US. I studied undergraduate mathematics, so I understand at least some of the stuff that computer scientists talk about. We have more than 150 engineers in the company, software developers, so I definitely have to talk to them very often. So I studied mathematics, and then I worked in product for about 2 or 3 years. And then I went to Harvard Business School, and then I went into financial services. It was probably the most boring job I took up. It was not for me, so came back to build product. But in between that, I came upon a problem which I thought from an outsider was a real problem. The problem was very, very simple for me. I wanted to travel Europe. I had 4 months off between my job and my university, and I did Europe for about 4 months, and I traveled roughly about 14 countries, or 14 or 15 countries. As an outsider who's not European, I wanted to know, for example, how to get from Amsterdam to Paris. Would anyone help me? What's the best way to get from Amsterdam to Paris? It's a very straightforward, high traffic route.
Just train.
Huh?
It's a train.
It's a train. Or the bus? Okay. The train's roughly about 4 to 5 times more expensive than a bus. So it really depends. The flight almost takes the same amount of time. It's almost 4 hours when you take an airport transits, and the trains are also almost 4 hours, so roughly the same. But I didn't know Thales. I didn't know the bus companies. I didn't know what my options were. So when I started traveling through most of Europe, this is what I experienced, which is infrastructure across all of Europe is fantastic. You've got trains and buses connecting every village, every town in almost every single country. The problem is there's no access to data, no access to distribution. You can only buy, back then, a Deutsche Bahn ticket in Deutsche Bahn. You could only buy Trenitalia on the Trenitalia website. So the market was very fragmented in access to information. So because of that, there's 2 real consumer problems that I noticed. If you move on, I'll come to that very quickly. It gets even more complex when you go what we call long tail. Small town, south of Naples. If I say what's the best way to go to Pamplona in Spain, most users will go to Google, say what's the closest airport to Pamplona, go to Skyscanner or whatever, find an air connection, and then come back to Google and say, how do I get from Bilbao airport to Pamplona? The consumer journey is broken, right? So overlay that in terms of the actual companies that provide inventory, right? These are your Thaleses of the world and all the companies that actually serve the consumers. Very quickly, I was lost in terms of most of my time went into finding how to travel rather than enjoying the journey. Because of the structural problem we have, which is the infrastructure in Europe is strong, but the fragmentation in terms of availability of information, most of European travel happens like this and like this. Most 70 to 80% of all transportation tickets is sold at the kiosk even today. And most transport companies in Europe run about 50 to 60% occupancy rate. That means 40% is running empty, right? So this is what we pay for most times as taxpayers. And this is basically utilization that we can better adapt with better distribution, better technology. So as I looked into this, there were 2 other problems that appeared to me. One was basically transport globally never came in a single distribution system the way other products you experience have. For example, when you watch movies, you mostly go to Netflix, right? When you want to listen to music, you probably go to Spotify or SoundCloud, but one platform has access to all information. You don't listen to one song in this and another song in this, etc., right? The same thing with, when you have Amazon, you get most of everything you want to buy in one platform, correct? But when you come to travel, consumers break the journey. I go from here to Hamburg, okay, that's a train. I go here to Madrid, okay, that's a flight. I go to a small destination, oops, Google, help me out, right? This is how consumers travel. You break the journey because current industry forces you to break the journey. This comes back to some of the product problems I told you, which is we experience today product problems that we don't even know exist, which is because consumers adjust to what the industry offers. It's like the red telephone box in London, right? Nobody cares for the red telephone box other than it's a nice photographic thing now, but until then that was the thing in use, correct? So yeah.
And what about, for example, now with Google Maps? This also has a lot of information?
Yeah. So exactly, you come back to consumer problem, right? Partners that fully solve the consumer problem, platforms, is where most of the demand goes, correct? So can you book a ticket fully? Can you transact after that? Can you get your delays, platform information? So you got to own the end-to-end consumer journey for you to fully transact. Google gives you transit connections, but you still want to buy a ticket. And these are mostly expensive tickets as well. So that's you got to solve the whole problem. Yeah. So coming back to this, so the first problem was that all of transportation globally is broken into air transfer. Airline industry, by and large, is very solved. There's still a lot of innovation going on, but you've got stuff like IATA codes, 3-letter airport codes, so everyone knows, LHR means London Heathrow, right? Or JFK is New York Airport, but no one knows the train station name in Paris or London, or that there are 5, 6, 7 train stations. There's no hop one off in Paris, for example, right? So underlying data is fragmented. It's the same globally, so you can't have. I have no idea where to buy a ticket from Shenzhen to Hong Kong, or how to go from Rio to Sao Paulo. I have no clue. Correct? Global transportation is not on a single platform. And the second thing is, travel as an industry never produced products that focuses more on the consumer. I'll tell you what it means. Because travel is structurally very much, I would call it layered. So you've got IT providers, you've got online travel agencies, you've got meta search companies, etc. At the end of the day, since no one owns the whole experience, the consumer is kind of being left out, if I can say. What does it mean? Like if you want to change a ticket, if you mess up your name, if you mistype something, you always pay a fee. Why is that? It should be all about the consumer. If you misorder on Amazon, they refund you immediately. So basically, it's how do we bring consumer products that helps the consumer in the front, and then how do we build technology that allows us to bring this experience where, when you buy travel, how many of you, when you have to book a travel, experience anxiety before booking? Right? Almost everybody. What is the relief you feel after you're done? It's fantastic, right? That should not happen. It should be so seamless, the experience, that you should enjoy the journey more than the amount of time we take in research and booking, because the industry is structured like this. Prices go up very, very fast. You check 14 websites. It's a structural problem across the whole industry. So those are the two things I noticed. So I was in New York after the trip, and I did some more research, and I realized that the market is 100 billion euros. This is Europe alone. It's a big market. Right? Every country, you add up state rail companies, thousands and thousands of buses across Europe. Italy alone has thousands of bus companies serving the whole country. But the bigger problem is global transportation, and I specify the word ground because air is largely normalized, is on a single, so global transportation is not on a single platform. So hopefully this gives a little bit of view on what I saw in this industry. So basically I had 6 months of research roughly in the US. Few things: market big enough, huge barriers to entry, a difficult problem to solve from an engineering standpoint. Imagine bringing data together across, yeah.
No, please continue.
All of this. Okay, cool. There's the opportunity for me to build a company. I moved here to Germany. 2 problems: I didn't speak a word of German. Now my wife is German, so I got lucky there. And the second thing is I didn't know a single human being. So it was a complete cold move to a new country where I could build this. Yeah.
Besides that, it's not on a single platform.
Yeah.
It's also not really on the same rules. Because I recommended you a page to a friend of mine from Mexico who's coming to visit. She's actually taking this trip from Amsterdam to Paris. Then she wants to take a flight because in Mexico that's how you move.
Yeah.
But then she asked me, so for the train, you have to come 2 hours in advance as well.
Yes.
I told her 5 minutes, she couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Plus, in France, it's always including a reservation, a seat reservation, while in Germany it isn't, so that's hugely confusing. Even taking a ticket here for the S-Bahn or the U-Bahn in Berlin is different from Munich and Frankfurt.
Yeah.
That must be even more confusing, I guess.
Yeah. No, you're hitting the crux of the problem, which is millions and millions. You go to a train station any day of the week, Thursday, Friday, Tuesday, to hop on off, you'll see hundreds of people. And you almost wonder, how did everyone get all the information they need in order to take that journey in a seamless way? It's like Uber is a great product for me, which is you press a button and a taxi is outside the door in 3 minutes. It's just crazy how it just works. You don't think about cash. You don't think about so many things. It's the same with Amazon. So when you go through such complexity, what you just explained, and cut through and build simple products that bring all of this information together, and it's hard to do, that's when you get this, I would call it magical experience, where people just, it's subconscious, it's, I call it utilitarian. You know, it's like light switch. You turn on, the light comes on. You don't think that when I turn on, oh shit, something's going to happen in technology and it's going to turn the light on. You just do it. The same way, you should just, Amsterdam, Paris, you press 2 buttons and you should just travel. It should be that simple. Yeah. Any other questions? So, hopefully that answers your question why I moved here. That was roughly 5 years ago. The big challenge was how to start, where to start. You need access to data, and this data is not easily available. So I started with building partnerships, very large partnerships that are not easy with a PowerPoint, I can tell you that. Partnerships where you go around in circles trying to figure out who is the decision maker. Companies that have 30 to 50,000 employees each. And data is not standardized, like you said. What's your name, by the way? Julian. Like Julian said, right? Data is not standardized. Not like Deutsche Bahn data talks to Renfe data, SNCF. It's all completely different. Just to give you an example, station code of Gare du Nord in Paris has different structures because there's 5, 6 trains. Eurostar, Thalys, TGV, SNCF, Deutsche Bahn all go to the same place, and each of the databases have their own way to indicate what that station is. So this was one of the first problems. And if you guys have specific questions on how to overcome where you have a dependency on third parties, I can talk about it. But for me, the initial start is always the toughest step of an entrepreneur, which is how do you actually kickstart the engine that starts firing. And the hard part about this is you should know kind of, how far you're willing to go and or walk away. So for me, it was very clear. I'll take a year to chase them. If they don't give me the data, it's just too hard. I was going to leave. So it took roughly a year, so I got lucky. The presentations were very difficult, so I started networking heavily into the industry. I didn't know anybody in Germany, Spain, or France, not a single human being. I'm not European. The benefit I had was I spoke English. So I come completely neutral. I have no bias. I'm not French. I'm not German. I'm not Spanish. I am who I am. I'm trying to solve a problem for the industry. And the second thing is I bought a very unique solution to their problems, which is I will bring you customers. You got fixed costs, fixed capacity, and how can I fill your trains? Correct? So I bought a solution that they actually are also working on. So when you start with this, and if you go back to here, correct? Very quickly you realize, oh shit, the problem is very large. It'll take me years before I can get access to all the data. But building products, like I said, is not always as straightforward as, okay, I have a vision and that's the product you create. You learn along the way. Some products are easier, of course. Some products you have full control of the data. For example, when you put what's called content management systems where all the data sits on your own, it's faster, you upload the data yourself. There's different problems of scaling. But our problem is we have a dependency of data. We have third parties, state rail companies, large buses, Flixbus, Jochen was here, a good colleague of mine. There's other bus companies in Spain like Alsa, National Express, etc. And then there's tiny, tiny, tiny buses that run their inventory on Excel spreadsheets, PDFs, paper scratch pads, right across the entire continent. So our first product looked like this, right? We still laugh about it, right? Very poor design, if I can say, right? Kind of a nice, beautiful image, and it only worked on roughly one country, only on a few routes, because this is all the data we got, right? I'll quickly jump into the engineering problem of this data. Right,
Sorry, just to understand this, did you just call Deutsche Bahn customer service and ask someone?
It was a little more sophisticated than that. So large companies have a lot of decision makers, so you go around in circles trying to figure out who makes the decision, and you learn along the way because you learn what they're missing, you learn what you need to pitch, and your pitch evolves. It's like pitching to an investor when you start a company. 99, how many of you want to start a company here? Okay, get used to this, right? 99 investors out of 100 will say a no to you. All of us have gone through this. That's just the norm. Failure and success, the difference is if you learn between the first and the second and the second and the third, don't keep going at it the same way because it's shame on you, right? So that's the same thing with pitching to companies. You learn what they're looking for, what are they missing, who's the decision maker, and you learn very, very quickly, correct? So it's not, there's no straightforward answer to, hey, what was the secret sauce? Why did they give you their data? If I can say, understanding what they need and just sheer persistence and not giving up, and that's it really. And remember, I didn't even speak a word of German, so the harder challenge is also language, which added on to my, yeah.
And maybe also how you organized yourself at that time. Also regarding the networking, did you go, for example, to conferences where you could meet the people, or did you just go on the websites and then was looking on the websites and then just call the people via telephone, or did you write email? Do you have like some best practices? What you learned there?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I generally cold call shamelessly. Like somebody told me today, actually, in the all hands, which is Michael Jordan. Somebody quoted this at our all hands meeting. By the way, Kate's our head of PR, so she's here making sure I don't say anything I shouldn't. So somebody quoted Michael Jordan and said, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." So I'm going to remember this. I just learned today. So it's the same thing with. So I'm very shameless in cold calling, asking for help, reaching out. Because if you do it with humility, with a humble way, and you are who you are, and you're not arrogant, and you just want help, most people will answer. Sometimes they don't because they're busy, etc. But that's fine. Don't get annoying and move on to the next person. But I generally cold call. I write a lot of emails to anyone asking for help, and over time you'll realize that there is a network, right? You can, for example, if you need something in the travel industry. Now you know me, you'll reach out to me. The same way you'll start building the network, and then they can connect you to others, and then it goes forward. I never really called customer service or any of these things. And there's no best practice. It depends on the industry, the space. Like if you're in completely different industry, like ad tech or something, then there's specific conferences that focus on ad tech. For me, there was no conference that told me how to get train distribution data. There's like conferences that tell you how to run trains, and Siemens will be there, but I didn't want to meet Siemens at the time. So it really depends on what works for you. You just have to find out what's a way to get in the door, and it is very difficult. So persistence generally helps, and learning quickly helps. Yeah.
You have kind of a master plan from the beginning, like
master plan was to get all the data in the world.
The Deutsche Bahn is the first company approach, and then you continue like this.
Yeah.
Or was it kind of coincidence?
That's a very good question. So why? So the part I didn't answer is why Germany, right? So I looked at kind of the ecosystem in Europe where startups were. Comes back to a lot of research generally helps you understand, because at the end of the day, opportunity cost of time is the biggest thing you have, so you need to figure out where you put your effort. So I did a lot of research, and I found London was a very big ecosystem but very high cost of labor, especially for engineering, correct? Stockholm was an ecosystem, was slightly removed from the rest of Europe for me to build a central hub. Berlin was very good at the time, still very young ecosystem, so it allowed me to come in early. But it had very good signs of, technical university, availability of engineering talent. People come from, we have a lot of engineers from Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, basically across all of Europe moving to Berlin. So there were many elements that allowed me to say, okay, Berlin. And when I had rationally decided it's Berlin, the emotional part where I don't speak the language or I don't know anyone can be overcome, because I've rationally processed that, okay, this is where I'm going to move. And I'm there already, right? So because I came to Germany, Deutsche Bahn became one of the first ones to contact. But I didn't just contact Deutsche Bahn. I actually went about probably like 10 rail companies across Europe, all at the same time, because it's state rail. You never know what hits or misses. So that's a good one, which is the only plan I had was to get the data no matter what, right? So there wasn't like, it's not a McKinsey presentation where I put, okay, the population of this country is 80 million, the population of the country next door is 20 million or 30 million, so I'm going to go to 80 million. No, whatever I get first, I'm going to go after it. So this hopefully answers your question on how to get started, right? I wouldn't lean towards over-engineering things at the beginning. You need to get your feet off the ground and you need to get momentum at the beginning. Yeah.
So you basically based your decision on where to get the best engineers?
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. We have about 300 people. Like I said, 180 roughly are in tech and product. We call it TPD, tech product design. So more than 50% of the company is what we build, technology.
But then why is it necessary to actually go to Europe? You could also have stayed in, I don't know, Silicon Valley. I mean, there are also a lot of engineers, and
yep.
This is a digital product, so you could have also stayed there.
Yeah, except we have to work very closely with our partners, and a 9-hour time gap can kill any productive. Yeah. You need to be where the market is and the customers are. Yeah.
Why didn't you use an intermediate platform like Google Maps to get all the data you need, so you don't have to make partnerships with all the...
Yeah, that's a good question. First, does Google Maps give their data to anyone? Second, Google Maps...
Google Maps API actually, which has all the data you need, but...
Until you start getting big enough and then you're like, oh shoot, it's expensive. Right? As a student, it's easy to do. But the second big problem is Google Maps didn't have that data when I started this. That's the bigger problem. But that's a great starting point to kickstart a project, any project, because you learn. The biggest thing you need to do early on is learn as quickly as possible. What works, what doesn't work. Especially when you build products. Yeah?
Google Maps still doesn't have all the data. In Frankfurt, for example, where I'm from, they don't have the underground transportation. So you look it up and you just wonder, why
Yeah.
can't I?
Good. Should we move on? Okay. So that led me to the first phase, which is how to get my first product together, and how to actually launch something. I still remember the moment when we launched. It's very fulfilling because it's a year plus of just idea, all the talks, let's actually start building something and start moving. So any questions on, because the section I just went through, which is how to start, is probably the biggest. Key takeaways are you're probably going to have a product that's not yet fully ready, fully solves your problem, but you still need to figure out what's the first step. We call it MVP, right? That allows at least for you to get information back and start building on top. The second one, I would say, takeaway is that there's going to be structural problems in an industry, or in the way the product functions today or the market is present today, and there's a reason for that. Otherwise, if the problem was too simple, somebody else would have solved it, correct? So there's a reason why industry structures exist, and the way it is. You should try to understand how to get behind that and try to understand how you will actually solve a problem. And the third thing is it's very, very important to have a real consumer problem. And this is so critical because you need to, and data will tell you very, very quickly, which is it's very easy to go into a startup and say, I want to be an entrepreneur, correct? I actually never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't know how to spell entrepreneurship. And I actually didn't, so for me, it was a real consumer problem that I wanted to solve, and it was my problem, and I wanted to solve this problem. So make sure that there's a real consumer problem so that you create companies that actually provide a solution to solve this problem. Because I can tell you, after working on a company for 5 years, I would say there's no glory in being a founder. You don't sleep I haven't slept for 5 years in a row. This is hard work and it's grunt, just you keep going at it. There's a lot of satisfaction and there's a lot of this feeling of fulfillment that you solve a problem. Like when you have 20 million customers using your product monthly, it feels good, but you should know what you're going into so that you go into it fully aware that there's a real consumer problem and I'm going to solve it. Yeah.
In the first year, was that just you, or did you have like a team?
I had 2 people, so it was just 3 of us. 2 I hired just to build a prototype. So when I actually meet Deutsche Bahn, I could show something more than a PowerPoint. It was all fake data. Yeah.
You said you hired people, so you actually want to kind of found the company by yourself and just have some first employees, or
Yes.
were they the founders with you?
That's a very good question. So because I moved, so I'm a single founder, and because I moved from the US to Germany, I didn't know anyone enough to give like half the company away. So it was easier, and at that time it wasn't even like, so we didn't touch on that here in detail. One of my challenges is nobody would trust me because this crazy guy comes from the US, doesn't speak the language, and wants to reinvent how transportation works. Like nobody would trust you. So it's the only thing I could hire at the time was freelancers who would do part-time jobs to get stuff done for me, and you go with what you get. So it was more lack of choice than like, oh, okay, I want to be single founder, I want to do it. It was not that.
Meaning so that you also had to pay them all the time by
Exactly.
money, and
Yep.
you have built up like a money reserve to finance this like 1 year,
Yeah.
and then you said like, okay, if
Exactly.
not, then
Exactly.
No, that was my question.
Nope. That was your question.
Yeah, kind of like, did you prepare your the founding of
Yes,
the
yes.
company? Or?
Yeah, I saved money before I moved.
Alright.
Yes, I knew I need to have roughly 1 year of cash before I could, get back into the labor market.
So what do you need here for 1 year of cash in Europe? What is kind of the budget you need as an entrepreneur?
Oh, that's a very good question. Oh, my guess is for $1,000 a month you can live comfortably, let's say, and if you pay 3 or 4K for at the time for 2 people, that's 8 or 9K, so about 70 to 100K, I would say. Roughly, it depends, really depends. Like again, my idea is I needed a year to get the data. Maybe you have an idea where you can get up and running. You can also raise angel money, which is you can raise 50K, 100K, etc. That finances you for shorter periods of time. And that's actually fairly easy to do now in the Berlin ecosystem. There's plenty of angel money. A lot of people are familiar with what startups are. A lot of people, there's enough people around who understand risk reward, and there's plenty of money that goes into raising money. It feels harder, but believe me, it's much, much easier now because there's a lot of knowledge on how to raise 150,000, 250,000, like small amounts that allow you to get started. That is doable. The worst thing you should not do, and this is something that really doesn't go well with the investor circle, is don't have a job and try to do a startup on the side. If you don't put your skin in the game, nobody wants to give you money. So make sure if you go in, or don't do it. There's no halfway through in a startup. Yep. So you get a part-time job, it doesn't work.
Would you also say that, for example, if you would now be in the same place, but at this time, would you then also go for angel money, or would you still do the same?
Oh, I actually did angel money. I did both. I did both. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Should we move on? So the next step is basically learning and growing. So once you have launched the product, how do you scale? So for us, the product was very technical. I'll give you an example. Deutsche Bahn gives you 3 trains when you use the product, and then you press früher später like 50 times to figure out the trains through the day. For us, we wanted to make sure the data is uniform. I just want to go from Berlin to Hamburg, give me all the trains, give me all the buses, and I just want to figure out what's the cheapest and fastest for me. So how do you take this data that comes to you and make it consumer friendly? As we went more and more into buses, the data was very slow, like 8, the smaller buses would give us API responses in 8-9 seconds. The consumer has patience of maybe 2 seconds before she or he jumps out, correct? So all of these technical problems you got to solve, that comes to the next stage, which is you need to understand what your early product is so that you can actually scale. And for us, that was basically in 3 axes. Very quickly we realized that we have to scale across 3 fundamentally different axes, and we organize the entire company on these 3 axes. Growth, which is basically user generation. The more users come, the more willing is the next partner, and the next partner willing to come on the platform. There's no users, it's a marketplace. Remember, there's no supply. Supply, it's a chicken egg problem, right? Most companies, Airbnb had this. Everybody has to solve this problem, which is get the supply and the demand will come, or get the demand and the supply will come. You need to bring both together kind of at the same time working. For us, the third big axis we needed to invest was product. Product for us was bringing this complexity. It's not something where people just type in their data and you can sell online. It's the complexity of engineering that brings, I just want simple 2 clicks and I want to buy a ticket. So if you use the product today, in most of Germany, it should take you faster, the apps should be faster to buy a Deutsche Bahn ticket on GoEuro. From the time you enter the station till you get to the platform, you should already have your ticket. It should be that fast. That's what we work on in terms of scaling. So, and it should be completely offline. You should not worry whether there's a telecom network, 3G. You should open your mobile ticket, and it should be that simple. It should be even more simple in future, but I'll come to that. So for us was to understand what are the 3 things that allow us to scale, and we organize the entire company around these structures so that each team has a dedicated focus, and then start building. Other challenges that we solve along the way. International versus domestic user. For a German, Sparpreis, normal price is very easy to digest. For a foreigner, just give me the ticket, right? Germany is actually easy. When you go to Italy, 16 fare types. I have no clue. I still don't know. I work in the industry and it's so hard for me to understand. I just want economy or business class, that's it. Or, you know what I mean? It's so, the underlying fare types. Age, it's adult is 14 in one country, 15 in another, 16 in another, child is 2 in one. So, and the aim was really to build one simple product that works in every market, and it has to be completely mobile, QR code where you never have to print a ticket. For me, if in 3-4 years you see a kiosk at the train station, I'm still not doing my job well, correct? So that's really the goal, completely mobile. That's the goal. So we had 2 things we had to adapt along the journey. One was it was easier for us to launch as a meta search. Okay, we could get the data and we click out to third parties. We still work with some partners, very few, that allow us to click out, but most of the ticketing happens on our side. So why did this happen? When we launched the product, I realized very, very quickly that trains and buses work very differently than flights. Like you said, you can go to the train station 2 minutes before, right? We have people buying the trains like 3 minutes before, maybe even sitting inside the train and buy the ticket. So the barrier to entry that you have in airports where, prices change, I got to go 1 hour before to the airport, doesn't exist. So it's largely a mobile-centric product. So 70% of our consumers today use our mobile application. So very few use desktop. Our desktop hasn't been touched in 3-4 years. We don't innovate yet on desktop. Most of our consumers come mobile. And on mobile, this is scaling a product. We realized that what we call meta search, which is, you click out to third parties, doesn't work because third-party websites are slow on mobile web. It's not a coherent experience, multiple languages, currency, all the settings, just a hard product to use. So we had to bring all the transaction into the platform. So we basically put, I would say, 50 engineers just to accelerate. Now, 98+% of all train transactions happen on site. Most buses happen on site. So basically, we started to bring everything because we had to innovate on the product because the market told us the market's going mobile. Correct? So this is again lessons on scaling, which is basically you understand how to build a product, you launch something, and then you see the data, you see where users are coming from, where users are dropping off, and you pivot. You don't always have like a green field in 2 years. This is what you should have a general direction, a vision, but your vision also grows along with time. Being customer centric is very, very important for us as a business. It's our first value out of 5 core values as a company, which is called our journey begins and ends with the customer. and we put a lot of effort. Every Monday we have an all-hands meeting. We present some small tidbits on a customer. Somebody had an experience. We always bring the customer first. In the conference rooms, we have customer centricity. We give, I think, 200, 250 euros. What is the travel program? 200 euros. We give 200 euros to every member of GoEuro to travel. And in return, we ask them to tell us why the product did or did not work for them. So we learn, everybody. So we pay people to travel. So again, bringing customer centricity is really, really important. I would say the lesson on customer centricity is not just for a B2C business like us, like consumer business. It could be B2B as well. But listening to the customer is one of the most important things for most entrepreneurs who build product. And at the end of the day, I strongly believe the person who pays my salary is the customer, and I'm nobody without customers using us. If you believe that so strongly that you're solving a customer problem, then it becomes the driving force of where you take your company and where you take the business. And the one more thing to touch on customers and product is most of you are engineers, correct? Always remember, building great technology with no customers is not as good as building great customer products and the technology evolves to solve that problem. Always remember that prioritize the customer first and the technology has to come to solve the customer problem. Because we are very clear, we have a lot of engineers and they all want to work on like the newest thing, the newest stack, etc. But if it doesn't solve a customer problem, then you have to question whether you should do that or not. So always put the customer first. And this is something we learn and we're still learning. I don't think we're still as user-centric as we need to be. We have to live and breathe like the frustration when you're at the train station and the train doesn't arrive, when you're trying to open the ticket on the app and there's no network connection. Like this is frustration, real moments of joy and anger that customers feel. And if we can take this completely out of them, then they're going to love us even more. So this is something that you have to definitely keep in mind whether you build B2C or B2B or basically any business. And then customer service, of course, plays a very big role. Our customer service at GoEuro reports into product. It doesn't report into operations. We want the customer service and product sitting close together. This is again bringing customer feedback back into the product, what we want to work on, and there's a lot that we need to do. And part of all of this scaling at the end of the day is building a great team. And this is easier said than done. There's a lot of good people and we're very, very strong team as a company. And as we scale, the challenges are always around communication, alignment, etc. because we want to use the power of every brain in the company because they are here to build something, they're here to fulfill the vision, they're here to solve the customer problem. The question is, how do you build that organization as you scale? So this is something we put a lot of effort into as a business on how to scale, but I think this is something that you'll probably call me 2-3 years out because 0 to 100 people, 80, 90 people, you're just running, you don't care. You just 3 pizzas, order pizza, work all day, all night. 100 to 200 to 50, you start to figure out, oh shit, the pizzas don't work anymore. We need alignment, technology breaks, front and back end. Oh no, it doesn't work like this. So you reorganize and you reorganize again. But the most important thing is great team is one of customers first, great team is the second biggest source of what builds great organizations. So this is also something at GoEuro we focus heavily on. So that's 2 pieces of scaling. I specifically left out today financing. You mentioned that we have raised 150 million. I'm here around after, so I can talk to you about that. The idea was, since the talk was more around product and tech and how to build a team, I put my presentation more around this. But if you have questions now on financing or how can you raise 150 million or whatever it is, feel free to ask me. I'm happy to answer questions on this. Because the next section we'll move on into where do we go from here. Yeah.
The other question I want to know, if you said there were 16 fairs or something in Italy.
Yeah.
So which one do you now offer me? Because I don't
So we still haven't solved this problem. I still offer you all 16, which is not a good thing. And allow you to pick So we still have work to do. Again, this is what comes back to, you start with the product, you figure out what users want. So are you an engineer? Yeah, so you'll understand the complexity. So basically, the local Italians need all 16 fares. Why? Because when they look at it, they're like, oh, I trust that it's something I'm used to. If not, they'll have to go back to Trenitalia and check, correct? A German doesn't care, I just want my train economy. So the code is different based on different user. It's the same code base at the end of the day, correct? So we're basically working on a project that allows us to channel the user into what they want to see, because it has higher impact on what you want rather than the same code base. So from an engineering standpoint, how do you break the code base to serve different users the same product at different moments of time in different ways?
What kind of feedback mechanisms do you use to verify that the solutions that you provide actually solve the problem?
Yeah, very good question. So the one of the biggest things as you build product is A/B testing. We test as much as possible. So we have a process that starts with what we call, and this thing comes with the growth of the company, right? At the beginning, it's gut feel, my gut feel, the early folks' gut feel. Over time, you start to get data and you start to get smarter on what works. So we start with today we start with what's called discovery, which means we have a hypothesis that something moves the needle, and we will build something quick, and we'll ship it to 1% of our users. At 20 million users, we get feedback very, very quickly if it works or not. And if it works, we'll rebuild it. That's scalable, because again, we have to scale it and then ship it. And then we go about it again and again. For those of you how many of you understand continuous improvement, continuous deployments? You do, right? So we basically had a very big monolith about 2 years ago, where all provider data, search data, which we surface to you as a user, and booking data, which is basically where we issue the ticket, was one big monolith with thousands, tens of thousands of lines of code, correct? Impossible for us to ship anything. So we broke that monolith into tiny pieces so each team can work on their own. And today we ship product to consumer 400 times a week. So we're shipping so much to consumer that our feedback loops are almost very, very, very quick. But this, again, at scale, this is the benefit of working in an organization at scale, is you can iterate very, very fast. No two consumer will see the same product at any point of time. Yeah.
I read that at about 150 employees, you reach a point of very big complexity where a lot of processes within a company have to change.
Doesn't work, yeah.
In depth. Did you experience this as well?
Yeah, I don't know if it was 150 or so. I think we went from something like 2 or 3 to 40 to 80 to 160, I think, and then 250. So this is 4.5 years of our journey, and you're digesting like double the team every year. That means everything has to change, and large companies reorganize like once a day, like half a decade or something like that. Yeah. I don't know if 150 was the right number. I've read the same thing, but somewhere around, I mean, every time you double, everything changes roughly.
So how do you structure a company? Do you have different departments and then different product teams?
Yeah, so that also evolves with time, because you take on more responsibility at the beginning when you're a founder and single founder. Like you kind of do every hole there is, you fill it yourself, correct? Because you got to keep it moving. And as you hire people, you can bring on those people and then give them departments. So for us, the structure was very, very simple. Growth, which means acquisition of customers. So this is marketing and engineering, both allowing growth, is one unit. Coverage, which is access to supply, which is all of engineering, all of product, and all our business development people who bring contracts is part of coverage. And then product, which is the core machinery that brings these two things together. And then you've got finance people, and we have another unit called BizOps, which kind of looks at the company end to end. So it was more around the organization was not, organization was designed around the problem we're solving. Yeah.
And then if you have like these kind of departments, how do you make sure that they also talk to each other and so on?
So this is one of the challenges as you scale, correct? So that they talk to each other, or they talk too much sometimes and then not focus, right? The way we organize is these what we call them tribes, they sit next to each other, so we don't have a marketing or tech only or product. They sit next to each other, so they have their stand-ups daily. The processes, the office kind of works towards making sure that they work together. Yeah, but they talk because they want to, right?
Which is your biggest competitor, or what do you like? Which competitor would you fear the most if it was created?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The way we look at it is, I'll come to that very quickly. So we operate in 14 countries. We have 600 to 700 suppliers. There's no one who has access to all the data in all the countries, in all modes of transport that we do. So the way we look at competition is, we have individual competition in different countries. So we'll have a train aggregator in the UK, we'll have a bus aggregator in Germany, we'll have a bus aggregator in Italy that we have to compete with in each market, but nobody at the scale of all of Europe. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Where do we go from here? So this is more like for us, but feel free to, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Just to look at where are we today so we can understand where we go. So we are in 14 countries today. So we fully operate in 14 countries. Of course, that doesn't mean we don't operate in the others. I think we have routes across all of Eastern Europe. Like you can take trains and buses from Czech Republic out or Germany out. When we say we operate in 14 countries, we cover 80-90% of all bookable journeys. Of course, there's always going to be the long tail, the small bus that we're missing, that we're trying to bring in, but we operate in 14 countries. Like I said earlier, we have 20 million monthly users. 70% of them come on our mobile platforms. So we're operating at a very decent scale. And this is a 4-year-old business, so we're still growing 100% every single year. Our goal is to cover all of Europe. For me, the vision was to have all of Europe. That's why I called it GoEuro. But the question is, what happens after? There's plenty of problems we solve today. All ticketing systems don't talk to each other. Like there's no universal mobile ticketing. There's no universal IATA codes of data standard across train and bus operators. There's no universal standards on delays, platforms. The thing I keep asking myself is, how do I get a product where it's so seamless that you should be able to travel subconsciously because it's just so simple. And there's a lot of work for us to do to build that. So with that, again, hopefully 300 people strong plus more will do that for us. Like I said earlier, we have 40 or 50 engineering open positions. It's a fantastic engineering problem to solve. We see terabytes of data coming through the whole industry. How many people are traveling a specific route? In August 9th, any route you tell me, I'll tell you how many people are going from one place to the other. The amount of data we collect is massive. So it allows us to really understand travel patterns, where is supply, where is demand, and how do we best match these two together. With that, open for questions. And I think we have 10 minutes or 15 minutes, right? Yeah. As much as you guys want, yeah.
So I saw on the map that the Baltic countries are pretty wide still.
Yeah.
If you want to now open up in that region, do you need to have all countries covered, or like if you now just have Greece, then you have this huge wide gap in between? Is it like you need to have all to like get the whole region in, or?
Yes. So what we've realized through one of our learnings is there's a lot of network effects between the countries, correct? Our supply and demand is not necessarily always local. We have foreigners using, so if a Spaniard uses us in Germany and realizes, oh, the product is great, they'll use us in Spain. So there's a network effects there. So generally when you have cross-border connections, it's easier for us to enter the market. So we try to go, now that we have scale, we try to go as much as possible, but it's not always the case. For example, a rail company in the East may not have any technology for us to integrate. There's just no way for us to connect. Then we'll leave that and move on to the next one because we're running fast. So there's no kind of ideal roadmap, but we do try as much as possible to actually connect the borders so that it's easier for consumers. Yeah.
So if you're kind of, or if you're growing that big, which kind of pressure can you also apply to the companies, like for example a railway company, to actually change their ticketing system, because you can say then, okay, that's much easier than also for you, or also do you plan to assist them? I mean, for example, Deutsche Bahn just changed like some years ago this like mobile app, because beforehand there was just like a ticket printout.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Ideally we can standardize across the whole industry with all of them, correct? But bringing all of the players to the table at the same time is a challenge. Scale is a question of each market. So Deutsche Bahn is 8 or 10 billion euros. So we need to get a lot bigger, correct? But it doesn't mean that they're very open to work with us, right? So we do work with them already on solutions that we can innovate, because we can innovate very fast as a tech company. That can be deployed. So we work with rail companies where we can provide technology solutions that they can actually use in their own systems, for example. Okay, go first.
Well, that's good. How do you actually earn the money? So do you have a fee on every booked flight or train, or?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. You need a business model. I specifically left out the business part of it to focus on tech and product. So we earn a commission on everything that we sell today from the supply.
So when you said then what when this is done, is there going to be a Go World, or is there going to be a Go Asia?
I hope so. So like I said, one of the things you learn as you evolve your vision, as you scale and you get bigger, the vision evolves. I personally want to solve the whole world of transportation in a single app. At that time, maybe not even app, whatever the customer behavior is at that point of time. But we don't stop at Europe. We have work to do in Europe for sure. Europe is not easy said than done. It's a big continent. It's a big market, but it's definitely not to stop here. Yeah.
For your marketing strategy, did you actually focus on European countries first, or are your main customers from abroad?
Yeah.
That's a different. Second, you could actually probably go into price discrimination, showing a higher prices for someone from the United States, with a higher purchasing power than from someone from Mexico.
Yeah. So these are all like both separate questions. One is marketing side. We market based on language. So when you do English, you do touch on more than just Europeans. It's the same with Spanish. You capture most of Latin America. So marketing typically works on language or channel. So whether it's PR or online advertising, etc. And the language generally covers larger regions. And we internally as a company, we have multiple domains, and we have I think 14 languages and 10, 12 currencies. I don't even remember how many. So we do localize as much as possible once we get scale in that currency. So if somebody's buying, a lot of Australians are buying, we'll add Australian dollar into that. So we do localize, but we do scale as general as possible and then allow it to scale. What was the second question? Pricing. So we're still in the process of, like I said, we have what's called a data science team that looks at very complex problems, like how do you bring all data in one place? How do you bring latency down to 200 milliseconds? It should load instantly with 95% accuracy. So that means I need to understand how prices are changing in the underlying systems across the whole ecosystem for me to give you something. So we're still investing more on a superior product, but there's many opportunities for us to go into our own.
The first thing I checked the price on GoEuro and the price on Thalys website.
Yep.
It's actually similar.
Yeah. So we're still offering everything you can buy on Thalys, you can buy on GoEuro, and hopefully much easier.
When you showed your original website, there was also a car in the logo, so you could also compare to car connections. I think. Why have you removed that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So car for us at the time was car rental. And we realized that car rental was completely a different product. People don't use car rental the same way they use rail or bus. They don't rent a car. It's two different experiences. This is again product innovation. It was actually very profitable. Car rental surprisingly is high. It's a very profitable industry, but we killed it because at the end of the day, we got to focus and build one thing, and it was a distraction, so we killed it. But we do have, for example, car sharing already, and then that's part of the bus ecosystem for us.
Wouldn't it be interesting for customers to compare how long it takes with a train to when they drive with their own car?
Yeah.
From how much time it takes?
We used to have that too. We should probably find a way to bring that back. But again, it comes back to a lot of people who have their own car generally are not looking for, how long does the train take. There's a lot of innovation. The funny thing about travel that I can tell you what I've learned is the opportunity for us to solve customer problems are endless. Like every customer wants their own thing around, is there 10 stairs on the platform or is there 4? Is there an elevator or not? So there's so much adaptability we can bring, the tiniest of town, and because they're so emotional, travel, it's like either you hate it or you love it. Because it works, you just love it. Everything was seamless, and you just the product is, oh my God, I've never seen something like this. Or you hate it because some little thing is broken. So the emotions are also very binary in our industry, because travel itself is very emotional. People invest time, money, and we need to make sure it works for everyone.
So about the technical standpoint, you said you ship like 400 times a week. How does it work now from your architecture?
So like I said, we're fully on continuous deployments. So we break the systems into the smallest module, and each can ship on its own.
Meaning that you have like a microservice architecture?
Exactly. And if you want to dig more, we actually give a lot of talks on how to build microservice architecture when you're already scaled. Because there's other stuff that comes with that, like quality assurance, etc.
I have 2 questions. First question is, what about multimodal journeys?
Yep.
I saw that you have 3 sections.
Yep.
What about
combining? So we first we launched. Talk about it. No? Okay. So we launched our first kind of multimodal combinations in one market. We're experimenting because we got to, again, at the end of the day, we want to solve the consumer problem fully. So if the train is late and the bus leaves, what happens to you? So we want to solve these real customer problems to make sure it's seamless. So we have all the data now. We're able to merge. From an engineering standpoint, we're already there. We're getting into what this means for consumer journeys. And when we actually offer this, for example, I'm going Berlin, Hanover, or Berlin, Frankfurt. You don't offer a bus to Hanover and then a train. It doesn't make sense. The idea of multimodal is to offer it when it actually makes sense, because there's no better alternative for you. So multimodal doesn't, in our view, mean you combine. Multimodal also means you can compare.
That's a great vision. If I may ask the second question, it's more about, let's say, the legal or political dimension. I just checked the website from EU, so you have at least three different directives when it comes to cross-border journeys. And let's say the summary is that if you do not buy the ticket from one single provider, you do not have the right to take the next train if the first is running late.
That's correct.
How do you face that problem? And if you sell a ticket including 2 different means of transport, 2 different companies, and even cross-border, how do you, from a legal point of view, solve that?
Yeah, so you're hitting the crux of the problem, right? So when people use our product and they'll search from, say, Berlin to some Madrid or Frankfurt to Madrid, and we'll show no trains, they'll say, oh, I know there's train. Yes, I know there's trains too. Problem is I can't issue the tickets because there's 4 different countries in between that have this legal problem, right? So the way we look at it is how can we innovate as much as possible, and how can we bring this data to the customer with transparency, and in the background, how can we work with supply to actually solve the problem. To give you an example, if I tell you these are 3 different tickets and the responsibility is on you, but I still allow you to press 2 buttons and buy it, you will still probably buy it, because your alternative is you buy 3 tickets, correct? So we try to go in both directions, but you're hitting all the genuine problems that we face while we scale.
So still no solution, or?
There is still no solution. There is a solution, yes. We're working on it. Yep. Yes, next question. Yes, afterwards.
Are you working on innovations like automated learning that
Tell me more.
Like that the app maybe knows where I want to go? And
there's also the privacy part. So right? So we want to make sure that there's data available for users when they need it, without encroaching too much. For example, we would not ever launch a product where I give you, what's your name? Huh? Fabio. Fabio, this is the train you'll take. It'll freak you out, right? So that's never going to be the case for us.
Maybe not, because when always on Friday evening I'm traveling back home. So why should the system not know?
Of course, that's basic innovation we can do, right? So every Friday you go, like we allow you to do a few settings, and every time you open the app, it shows you Friday, and then you hit a search, and it shows you the next 3 trains. Of course, we can do this. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I had one more question. I'll come to you.
Yeah, okay. Which products did you have in mind when you started your company? Did you have like reference, inspirational projects?
So my favorite product is Amazon. It's I call it if I can be so more frank, it's not the most beautiful products, but it's the most functional utilitarian product. It works every single time. And what's great about Amazon is what you don't see of the iceberg below the surface. It's the massive distribution. Like, a cup made in China is shipped to me same day. Imagine the power of the underlying thing where you press 2 buttons and they give you something. So that's why products are always, it's the magic of products. It's the same challenge for us, is how do you bring the complexity of an industry into something so simple that the user doesn't feel the complexity, like 3 different train systems. Or your job as a product innovator is to remove complexity. So for example, one of our core values in the company is simplicity is the fuel of innovation. So we break problems into as simple as possible, because anyone can talk big data, big AI, all this stuff, right? Ask 4 people, ask them to go deeper, and that's where the real strong ones will break from the weak ones, because they can explain to the common man what they're actually saying. Yeah.
So in general, for a startup, it is important to focus, and especially when you have like customers, it may be also important to focus on customers. For that, it's normally a good case to maybe have like a persona on which you focus to align like the whole company to solve this problem for this one persona. Yep. Do you have such a persona or multiple personas, and how do they look like?
Yeah, we do. We even have names for those, but generally we try to solve, most of our customers are between the age of 18 and 34, and we have familiar journeys and non-familiar journeys.
And how did you come up with these personas?
So that comes mostly from marketing research. So it's not just marketing research, it's also our own data, and you bring them together in terms of personas.
So later on, but in the first place, you have to kind of be the persona yourself.
That's correct. So that's a good question. When you start it, I just want to solve the problem. I didn't even know what personas were back then. But over time, you have a marketing department that spends the money for you. Yeah. Sorry, one more question here. Yeah.
How do you negotiate commissions with brand companies? Do you have existing deals with like travel agencies that you can?
We are the travel agency.
Like old-fashioned travel agencies, or?
No, because they issue paper tickets. So we go direct to the train companies to negotiate. Our dealings are almost always directly with the operators themselves. So there's no middleman in most cases.
Yeah, for example, when you book a flight with Skyscanner or something, they often have cheaper offerings via online travel agencies than directly from a vendor.
Yeah.
So I guess you wouldn't show these offerings to me because you are the travel agency.
Air is something we've spent most of our time innovating on rail and bus. So this is where it's always direct. Air is still something where we bring information together, because most of our resources go into trains and buses. This is the part that's not yet solvable. With air, we're now looking at what does it mean from a customer standpoint, and we're still not yet able to formulate this yet.
So air isn't a focus for you?
We have a ton of customers who book air, millions actually, so we do serve the customers. But again, we don't want to build another air product that looks like every other air product. We want... If we do air, we do our way.
When I book a train to Paris or something, I also need to book a hotel or something like that when I arrive there. So is it clever for you to add something or expand to the hotel system? Or is it just I know how the travel system works and I stay there and
so it comes back to what he said earlier, which is focus. We're still focused on building transport because, like I told you, the problem is complex and we want to make sure. But what we do is partnerships. Because we know that you're going to Paris, I can put an ad of like booking.com in that, and then if you book, it's up to you and booking.com, but we can surface these ads, for example, right? Or let's say connections, we call it ads, but it's mostly making sure you have access to, like Johannes was here right earlier, I don't know if you guys met him, from Get Your Guide, so we can surface tours and activities, for example, but it's not a core focus for the business.
Okay.
So this is also a more personal question. So when you went for undergrads in math and then also went to Harvard Business School, what kind of skills or lessons did you learn there which help you on your entrepreneurial journey?
That's a good question. So that's a very good question. No one's asked me that question before. What kind of skills? So when I went to, I'll start with Harvard because that's the easy one. When I went to Harvard, I thought I was smart because I got in. And then it just humiliated me. I thought I was the dumbest guy that's ever born because people were just so smart that I was so grounded immediately that I knew no matter what you build or how big, like you got to stay 2 feet firm on the ground because there's so many people way smarter than you, way more successful than you. So that's something I bring to the business today. Like I'm very accessible to everyone in the company. Like I sit with the team, I don't have an office. Everybody, I'm at TGI Fridays drinking with the team. So that's something, I actually like it because I feel the energy and I still feel like I'm part of the team. The mistake I make sometimes is I don't realize if I say something, they take it seriously. So I haven't yet grown up, let's say. I still behave like I'm still part of the team, but I'm not, right? So that's that. And then from my undergrad, I think, so the one thing I tried to bring into the business, I don't know where I picked it up, either undergrad or one of my older product roles, is basically, so I have this principle that we have to fail as much and as fast as possible. And acceptance of failure creates to great outcomes. And so basically we have high tolerance for failure. And so basically engineers break stuff on our product all the time. Like it's completely okay. And we even have we joke about how many times you broke production because it's okay, because you'll never learn if you don't fail. The only thing that's not okay is you fail twice because of the same reason. So this high degree of failure acceptance is necessary for you to take risks, and the more risk you take, the more you're going to innovate. So these probably are the two biggest things that I still apply every day. Yes?
You said your business plan is based on selling tickets in advance of the journey. Mm-hmm. I know that there are some companies who try to make tests with selling you the tickets after you have training.
Yeah.
Do you
after?
Yes. So
how does it work?
So you go on.
That's new to me.
Yeah. So you go on the train.
Yeah.
And the system realizes where you got on the train and where you left the train.
Yeah.
And then they charge you the ticket for this train.
Okay, so it's like a mile-based.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Do you feel something like this?
That's a very good. So we think about this all the time. This again comes to the future of where travel should go. Absolutely. For me, future is not the whole world of transportation on the phone. It's the whole world of transportation seamlessly, whether it's you walk in and there's something that recognizes that you're there, or any other technology. We definitely look into this as well. Absolutely. Yeah.
Don't you think that the transportation to the start of your journey is crucial? Because when you just say maybe from Potsdam to my hometown is Oldenburg, and when I entered in GoEuro and then it only shows me bus connection that actually start in Potsdam.
Yeah.
So it says I should go via Rotterdam or something like that, which is complete nonsense. But when I would enter Berlin,
you have better options.
I have a direct connection.
Yeah.
So I think it would be really good when it also looked at
radius
cities nearby and had the S-Bahn included or
That's
stuff
correct.
like that.
There's something, so this is one more part of product innovation. This is an engineering problem we're trying to solve. So to give you an idea, underlying technologies, if we ping them a lot, they crash because they're not built for online scale. So we have what's called a look to book ratio. For every scan we do, every 10 scans we do, we have to issue a certain number of tickets. And if I scan 10 cities close by, times 10, I've got 100 scans very, very quickly, and the problem multiplies very, very, very quickly. To give you an idea, right, we serve 10,000 train stations in Germany. To 10,000 train stations is 1 billion routes we serve today in one country. No cross-border, no complexity yet, right? So very, very quickly. So you're hitting on some of the tough problems we face as an industry, which is, how do you take limitations that the industry gives you and still give intelligent things for the customer. So this is something we will solve very quickly, I think, which is the radius searches. Yeah. Yes.
So just said that. So for all the information, not only route-based but also pricing,
yep.
You ping external services, and if so, because you said like your focus is very much on buses and trains, the prices don't really change too much.
Yep.
Do you not cache this data as
we
well?
do cache heavily.
Okay. So
very heavily.
Yeah.
They do change very often, actually.
They do?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So, at your point, how do you kind of educate yourself in terms of, for example, also for the future of your business? So do you, for example, regularly go to conferences? Do you talk to other founders, or what is your, or do you read a lot of books? What is your kind of method of learning something new?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So I basically have a lot of friends that I'm lucky with, and I built these friendships over time. And generally, I look for people, I call them mentors, but it's not really formal in any way, that are roughly 4 to 10 times bigger than what we are, because I'm always looking at 4 to 10 times bigger than what you're. The 4 to 10, the range, because you don't necessarily find 5, for example, you find what you find, right? So that allows me to constantly ask them how they're organized, what do they focus on. For example, I was talking to Robert Gens, who's the founder of Zalando, and I asked him what does he spend his time on. He said 30% of his time goes into making sure he doesn't get in the way of others so they can run. I'm like, wow, that's incredible, 30% free time just to think. So then I'm thinking, what should I do today that allows me to get to 30% free time that I can just think, let's say 12 months from now or 14 months from now. So generally having someone that you can look up to at all points of time, and as you scale, this changes, like you'll get different people, and is generally a very good idea, but it comes back to the rule I use, which I said earlier, which is you have to be grounded, right? Otherwise what happens is, if you know someone, you have to respect their time. They're running a company much bigger than yours. You got to work around their schedules, because everybody is always busier than you. That's the simplest. So you got to change your schedule, and you got to make sure that you're careful with their time. So if you ask a question and they tell you something, 3 months later you ask the same question, they're not going to work with you anymore. So you got to make sure that you digest, implement, go back with something new, so that they feel like you're actually someone that is learning so fast that they feel the energy back from you, and if they don't, then very quickly. So generally, this is a general advice for everyone, which is if you can find someone who you can project out in a few years or whatever you want to do, that's generally a very good thing, because you learn a lot.
Then also, what would you tell your younger self when you start your company, and also before you studied?
That's a good question. Before I studied, I would have told myself to start the company first, because there's no shortcut to entrepreneurship than just going into it. So I would have told myself start. If anything, I'm wondering why I waited so long, because this is what my passion is, and I want to build products that solve consumer problems. And what would I tell myself when I started the company? I think I would not have done anything differently. I'm very, very, very lucky in so many ways. Luck plays a huge role. Of course, there's a lot of hard work, but luck plays a huge role across founders. And I would just sit down and have a reality check on what I'm getting into, because I went into it head on without realizing, shit, what's going to hit me. And this is sleepless nights you inherit all the problems of the entire staff. Basically, it's like if somebody is not well or they're having a personal problem, you inherit their problem because they're your people. Like, it's very hard to separate personal life from company because you pay salaries for 300 people. You got to make sure their kids go to school in a good, like it's all of that you inherit, and you still have to separate it to a business that you got to run and you got to think rationally. So I would probably have, thought a little harder, but now that I'm here, I don't think I would change the decision itself. Yeah. Yes, sorry, I didn't see you.
Following up with your question, with your answer just now. So, many problems are coming your way. Who do you talk to with these problems? So let's say
there's just opportunities. There's only opportunities.
Because like the problem I see with startup problems is that most of them you cannot really talk with your co-founder because you need to work, you need to focus, as you said. Your family not necessarily understands you and have a business background or a technical background. Friends, they're again not a good option because you want to have fun and you want to see them and you don't have that much time left.
Yeah.
And what's left? Therapist and I guess just around them. So what was your way to?
So you're coming to you're lonely. That's absolutely the case. I don't want to bullshit you. You try to get source of, like, again, entrepreneurs are always bullish, opportunists. They look for opportunity, not problems. They look for ways to solve rather than how hard it is. Like, you're always looking for how to solve problems. So you generally get an ecosystem around you where you have smart thinkers, stuff you like. For me, it's history. So I enjoy reading about history because, whatever happened 1,000 years ago tends to generally happen over time again. So I learn from that. But you form an ecosystem that gives you this comfort. But again, you have to, it's like advice, right? Like from this talk, each of you may take 1 or 2 things or 3 things or nothing. That's completely okay. Because at the end of the day, you have to process all of this on your own. As long as you surround yourself with smart people who give you advice. And then it's up to you to take what's necessary when, etc. Yeah.
Do you have something like, I don't know, special habits? Like, for example, in terms of, like, for example, Bill Gates, he often takes, like, I think one time a year, like 1 week off to just think about his future or the future of his company, or do you have like something similar?
I do take 2 weeks off a year, and I do exactly that. So no comparison at all to one of the most successful men. But I think through the future. I don't think through the past when I generally take time off.
And this is basically also your vacation, right?
Yes. Your brain doesn't stop really thinking, so.
Okay, I think there will be more time for questions during the get-together and the craft beer while answering the questions and being craft beer. So thank you for being here. Thank you for all the impressions you gave us on GoEuro, but also on your personal journey. That was really inspiring for me. I hope we will see you again.
Yeah.
And for all of you, let's get together with a few beers. Mate is there as well, and also some snacks. Okay.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.